It's the worst night of the summer, and you're standing right in front of the fan with sweat running down your back. You crank it all the way up to high, and you wait. And the room is still hot. Nothing changes, because that fan was never cooling your room in the first place. Not tonight, not last summer, not ever. And no one ever bothered to tell you that. The Japanese worked it out a long time ago. They stopped trying to cool the room at all and started cooling the person instead. And with nothing but a plain fan, they could make the air come off cold. No air conditioning, no ice. It cost you nothing. And once you know the trick, it takes about 10 seconds. I'm Richard Nakamura, by the way. I grew up in a Japanese house in Ohio, and then I spent 30 years as a repairman, hauling away machines folks swore were broken. The funny thing is, most of those air conditioning units had nothing wrong with them. The people who owned them had just never learned there was another way to keep cool, the way my own family always had. So that's what I want to pass on to you tonight. We'll start with the simple version, then I'll show you exactly why it works. And right at the end, I'll give you the trick my family swore by. A Japanese fan that blows cold air without a single cube of ice in it. I'd bet you've never heard of that one. But let's start with where most folks go wrong, because almost everyone fights a heat wave the same way. They try to chill the air. They run the air conditioning until the meter spins, or they leave a fan going all day in an empty room, and by the end of the summer, they've paid a few $100s to cool air they were barely even standing in. Nobody ever taught them the one thing every Japanese summer was built around, which is that a fan does not cool air. It cools skin. Once you understand that, the first move is almost too simple. A fan only cools you because the moving air evaporates the sweat off your skin. And when water evaporates, it has to pull heat out of whatever it's leaving behind, that whatever is you. So all you have to do is help it along. Grab a little spray bottle, the kind that runs you a couple of dollars, and mist your arms, your neck, the front of your shirt, or just hang a damp cloth right in the path of the fan. Do that, and all of a sudden, the breeze comes off cool, instead of just loud and busy and warm. You'll feel the difference in about 3 seconds. Same fan, same room, and the only thing you changed was a little water. The reason it works has nothing to do with the air being cold, which is exactly the part the cooling aisle would rather you never understood. I'll come back to it because it's the whole secret. But first, stay with me, because the thing that really changed how I get through a heat wave wasn't a trick at all. It was watching my mother run a whole house in Ohio without ever once touching the air conditioning. You have to understand, summers in Ohio get heavy. Thick, wet heat that just sits on you. By noon, all the way up and down our street, you could hear every neighbor's unit kick on and start roaring, and my mother never turned ours on. As a kid, I figured she was just being stubborn, or pinching pennies the way she pinched everything. It took me years to see what she was actually doing. The rest of the street waited for the hottest part of the day, and then blasted cold air straight against it. My mother did the opposite. She cooled the house at night. After the sun went down, she'd open the place up end to end, every window and both doors, screens only, and let the cool evening air pour through for hours. Then, before the sun was even fully up, she'd go around and shut every window tight, pull the shades down, and seal the whole house up. And that cool she'd let in overnight, the house would hold on to it like a battery, straight through the worst of the afternoon. That is an old Japanese idea, and it goes back a long, long way. You build a house and you run a house, thinking about the summer first. The heat is the enemy you plan your whole day around, not the cold. She was not cooling the air just to cool the air. She was keeping a body comfortable and keeping the cool she already had from leaking out the windows. And 30 years later, there I'd be, standing on somebody's lawn in July, sweat soaking through my shirt, wrestling a perfectly good air conditioner out of a window because the owner wanted a newer one, thinking the whole time about my mother sitting cool and easy in a house that never owned a single one. So between the wet skin and the open windows, you have already got two things that work, but I still owe you the reason behind them, because there is something going on here that nobody selling you a cooling unit will ever explain. And once you see it, you will never look at a fan the same way again. It starts with your sweat. That moisture sits on your skin and slowly evaporates into the air. And to make that jump from water on your skin into vapor, it needs energy. And it takes that heat straight out of your body. That is the whole engine of it. And that is why you feel cooler. Your own sweat is carrying your heat away. The trouble is, a thin layer of warm, damp air clings against your skin. And once it is sitting there, it stalls the whole thing, because the sweat cannot evaporate into air that is already full. And that is the one job the fan is actually doing. It sweeps that stale layer away and pushes fresh, drier air across you, so the evaporation keeps right on going. The fan is not making cold. It is just clearing the way so your body can cool itself, which leads to the part that breaks the whole myth wide open. The motor inside that fan, spinning away all night, actually puts a tiny bit of heat back into the room. So a fan running in an empty room ends up leaving that room very slightly warmer than it started, not cooler. If the air isn't blowing across a person, the fan is doing the exact opposite of what you think it is. And the real enemy in all of this is humidity. When the air is already soaked through, your sweat has nowhere to go, so it can't evaporate. And on a night like that, a plain fan really does almost nothing for you. That's not the fan failing, that's just the air being full. And it tells you exactly when you'll need a little extra help. So now, knowing all that, let me save you from the mistakes I've seen in just about every house I've ever walked into. The first is closed windows, with a single fan stirring the same hot air around in a circle, going nowhere. What you want instead is a cross breeze. So put a fan in a window on the hot, sunny side of the house and aim it to blow the hot air out. That pulls cooler air in from the shaded side, and instead of stirring the heat around, you're walking it out the door. The second mistake follows straight from what I just told you about the motor, and it's the fan left pointed at a wall or running in an empty room. A fan only does its job on a body it can actually reach, so aim it at yourself, and when you leave the room, turn it off. You were never cooling the room anyway. The third is throwing the windows wide open at the peak of the afternoon, because on a hot day, all you're doing then is inviting the heat right inside. Close up and shade the windows at midday, and open them back up at night. That's the same night flush my mother ran, and it works in any house you'll ever live in. And the fourth, if you've got a ceiling fan, is having it spin the wrong way. In the summer, the blades should be pushing the air straight down on top of you, turning counterclockwise, and plenty of folks have theirs set backward and never feel a thing from it. There's usually a little switch on the side to flip the direction. On top of all that, the Japanese stacked a few more layers, And the good news is, you can do every one of them with stuff from any hardware store. They would hang a shade screen on the outside of the window, called a sudare, to stop the sun before it ever hit the glass and turned into heat inside. And you can hang an exterior shade or a simple awning and do the very same thing. Stopping the heat outside is worth 10 times more than fighting it once it's already in. In the evening, they would splash water across the shaded stone and pavement, called uchimizu, to cool the air settling in around the house as the sun dropped. And on those truly soaking nights, the ones where the air is too full for any of this to work, that is the one time a dehumidifier earns its keep. Pull the water back out of the air, and suddenly your sweat and your fan can both do their job again. If all of this sounds too cheap to be real, well, that is kind of the point, because there is no money in any of it. Nobody's getting rich telling you a wet rag and an open window will outcool a $400 machine. The cooling aisle needs you to buy the unit and then buy the power to run it every single summer for the rest of your life, while my mother just needed a house to stay livable on one paycheck. Those are two very different needs. So let me be straight with you, the way I always try to be. When I tell you a fan can cool you the way the air conditioning does, I mean it cools your body. It does not cool the room. And on a brutal, soaking wet night, you are still going to want that dehumidifier humming in the corner. This is not magic. It is just knowing what a fan is actually for, and almost nobody does. Which brings me, finally, to the thing I promised you at the very start. Over in a part of Japan called Gifu, there's a fan they call the Mizu Uchiwa, the water fan. People would dip it in the cool river and wave it on the hottest nights. And the whole idea is sitting right there in the name. The breeze that comes off it is genuinely, honestly cold, because it's evaporating that river water into the air with every single stroke. It's everything I just told you about your own skin, built straight into the fan itself. And the beautiful part is, you already don't need to go buy one, because you already own everything you need. Wet a cloth, wring it out so it's damp and not dripping, and drape it over the front of any fan in your house. That's the whole thing. You've just built your own water fan, a cold breeze out of nothing but tap water, and the fan that was already sitting in your room doing nothing all along. The old folks even had one more, and I can't help but love this one. They called it the Chikufu Jiin, the bamboo wife, a hollow tube of woven bamboo you'd hold onto in bed, so the air could flow all the way around you instead of getting trapped and going hot against the mattress. I'm not about to tell you to go find yourself some bamboo. You don't need it, but I just love that they thought of everything, right down to how you'd sleep. So let me ask you something, and I read every single answer that comes in. Down in the comments, tell me which room in your house is the one that never cools down, no matter what you try. And try that damp cloth on your fan tonight, then come back and tell me what changed, because I really do want to hear it. Next time, I'll show you the Japanese way to stop the sun before it ever turns into heat in the first place, which is the natural next step right after this one. My grandmother used to tell me about mottainai. It means nothing good should ever be wasted. Not the thing in your hands, and not the knowing of how to keep it.